Welcome to Scoolinary, the online cooking school that transforms people and connects cultures. You will learn with the best chefs in the industry, and you will discover the broadest online catalog of topics related to gastronomy. We publish new courses every week. In our podcast, we have coffee with a chef every week. Each of them will tell us about their experience and their vision for the culinary world to help you better understand this exciting industry. Come on, join us for coffee. Today, we are joined by Branden Lewis, faculty member at the esteemed Johnson & Wales University, where he spearheaded the development of the Sustainable Food Systems Bachelor of Science degree and minor in Culinary Sustainability. As an advocate for sustainable practices in the food space, Branden often takes his students out of the classroom and into the fields, on boats, or to farms where they pick, shuck, and pluck ingredients from the source to learn about our fractured food web. He's driven by an insatiable interest in evolving food systems and culinary sustainability education and has published peer-reviewed works on the topics. Chef, teacher, leader, he is influencing new attitudes toward food. Hi, Branden. Welcome, and thanks for joining us for coffee.
Thanks for having me. I got my cup right here.
Excellent. Well, you answered my question. So you are a coffee drinker. How do you take your coffee?
Well, it definitely typically hot in the mornings and maybe iced in the afternoons. And I've been partial to oat milk these days, but I like regular milk or oat milk in there, and that's about it.
So before we begin, we'd like it if you could please tell us in your own words who you are and where you're from. And that is so our listeners who are around the world have a chance to get to know you a little bit better.
Sure. So, as you said, my name is Branden Lewis. I'm a chef and a doctor of educational sustainability. I teach here at Johnson & Wales University. That's in Providence, Rhode Island, in the United States. And I lead our Sustainable Food Systems major and Culinary Sustainability minor, which you mentioned. So this is a university where we are really all about food and experiential education. And I get to really live my dreams every day working here and working with students who are hungry to learn and to learn about their food web.
Oh, great. So you mentioned a few of your degree achievements. You've also had stints in professional kitchens, what you told me earlier in England and also in Switzerland. And of course, now you mentioned now you have a position on the faculty at Johnson & Wales. And it is, I might point out, one of the most distinguished culinary institutions in the U.S. Can you catch us up to your career so far, please?
Well, sure. I'll try to fit it into a nutshell because this
Okay.
is a wild industry, and any careers in food can take you around the world. So I actually attended the university as a student. I was the first in my family to go to college, so I was pretty driven by the opportunities I had that my parents didn't, and that really made me work hard. But also, I was in love with food, and so I attended the university, and then I took time off to get some experience at Michelin star restaurants. I went to a place called Les Poussins, which meant the baby chicken in Lyndhurst, England. It no longer exists, but that was we called it a restaurant with accommodation because it was a hotel with 13 rooms. But really, it was all about the restaurant. We had people that would like fly in by helicopter just for tea. It was pretty swank place. But it was positioned in the middle of the New Forest, which is where Lewis wrote Alice in Wonderland, Carol Lewis, and the real Alice is buried in the local town church, which is pretty wild. Anyway, so that was a great place to work at, and everything was really, when working in England, everything's on an island, so everything's fresh and local. And they don't even realize how lucky they are to have that. They've never been displaced from it that far. And we even had our own hunter on site. So it was we did some amazing things, foraging and things.
So wait, hold on there. So
Oh,
what kind of what kind of things would show up on the plate?
well, we had quite a bit coming out of the woods. So we would go foraging for mushrooms, wild white asparagus, like under leaf cover, things like that. And we had some seeded items in there. So we had wild garlic in the forest. To get to this restaurant, you'd have to hike through the forest. It was amazing. to hike through the forest to get to Lyndhurst, where the bookstore, coffee shop, and everything you need on your day off is. Um, and we also had, as I mentioned, a hunter. So I'd come in and there'd be like 18 rabbits laying on the floor in front of the walk-in that I'd have to clean
Wow.
and produce menus for with the team. And it'd be geese one day, and I'd be plucking geese all day. That's the kind of place it was. And here in the U.S., it's clearly a little different than that. And like I said, I think the idea of local when you're on an island nation, or like the countries in the UK, everything's already local, and there's regional pride in different products. So like you're lucky and blessed to be in that situation. Um, so back to your original question. After that, I worked in Geneva, Switzerland for a bit on at the Mandarin Oriental on the Côte d'Aron,
Hmm.
and that was an amazing experience as well. And working in Europe and traveling into France and into Italy was just remarkable, especially because I was in my younger 20s. So I was poor, but I was adventuring, and I had chances to go to when I was in England, I flew to Paris to backpack through the place, and I just had all kinds of little culinary adventures. So let me fast forward. So I when I finished my bachelor's at Johnson and Wales, I had an opportunity to join a master's program where I would get paid to teach at the university. And when I did that, I was positioned. I was assigned to this place called the Feinstein Community Service Center, and I was in a position where I would teach undergraduate students about issues in the food system and things related to food justice and food access. Um, that was where I first really became introduced to it, and it was a strong juxtaposition to what I was doing in Europe. And that's really important because I was able to identify some of the things I witnessed working abroad and in these Michelin star restaurants that were sort of maybe a little less than ideal. And this is where that sort of caught on for me. After finishing my master's degree, I went and instead of going back into the restaurant industry, I went to work at a nonprofit in Providence called the Genesis Center, which is a nonprofit that helps immigrants and refugees get affiliated with living in the US. And I taught workforce development. So I was teaching culinary classes to people from other countries. And it was quite the experience because I was learning not only many of my students knew how to cook, they just didn't know American standards, say, of sanitation or our common practices. And many students were new to cooking, and I was teaching them how. But I learned a lot there, and a lot of my students, every student was an adult, and so learning from people that I was teaching, it's really a two-way street, as we like to say. And I was learning as much as I was teaching, and it was right around 2011 that my alma mater reached out to me. Johnson Wales reached out to me because they were looking to develop a wellness and sustainability concentration, and they wanted to know if I'd come on faculty to do this.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, yeah,
Okay.
so I'd gone back to Johnson and Wales,
Yeah.
and I was part of a team, and we put together a concentration that started focusing on these culinary sustainability concepts. And that really is what spurred the development of this new major. So that was back in 2011, but that program was wildly popular with our students. And due to its popularity, we saw that there was an opportunity for a full degree program. And so we went into this developing this full degree program. And I started my doctoral program around the same time. And I was able to use my doctoral program I told you that it was in educational sustainability to help design the program. And so basically, the program's design was inspired through my dissertation work.
Ah, okay. So
So I know that was a long answer. I
no,
apologize for that.
that's perfect. So like I mentioned before, the program is called Sustainable Food Systems, and it's Bachelor of Science degree, and it's there's a minor in Culinary Sustainability. Sustainable food systems seems like an incredibly broad subject. How would you define it?
Well, it's almost like an ideal, right? The thing is, sustainability as a concept is a giant umbrella term. It really intersects with every person on Earth, because we all live on this thing we call spaceship Earth. We're all breathing the same air. We're using the same resources. We're creating waste that we all have to live uh, on this planet with. And so, because of that, when it comes to food systems, we have a tremendous impact on our natural state and our natural ecosystem and environment and resources. And a lot of programs around the world focus on, when they're a food systems program, they focus on agriculture, conservation, or maybe health and nutrition. We cover those too, but we also are the first one to ever exist that's a bachelor's degree program that's focusing on culinary and pastry arts. So our students are learning a trade as well as how to be a leader in the food system. For some of them, that means becoming a farm to table chef. For some of them, it's going into government or going into nonprofit work in policy and advocacy circles. For some of them, it's supply chain management or public health or community nutrition. The point is that we have in this program by design a lot of free electives so that I can help steer students on custom paths to find their niche in the food system where they can be most effective. And so, in a way, it's hard for me to answer the question because my students are all individuals with individual dreams and aspirations, but we meet one on one. I'm the mentor for every student in the major,
Oh, wow.
and
Hmm.
we figure out what they want to do. And then I identify with them what courses will get them there, what experiences, what internships, and what pathways. You know, Wendy, there's this concept. It's called, we all know what forecasting is. Forecasting is like where you kind of try to figure out what the future will be. There's a concept called backcasting. And backcasting as a concept is the idea of understanding where you want to be in the future and then making decisions to get you there now. And so instead of thinking of forecasting and guessing towards the future, you're being proactive and not being passive, but actually making choices and getting experiences lined up that will get you to where you want to be as a goal. And that's what we do with the students. And so the students envision what they want to be, you know, quote unquote, when they grow up. And then we help get them there and figure out what sort of experiences may get them down that pathway. And
Yeah, and
yeah,
it seems like, from my perspective, it seems like there are opportunities that are coming up all the time. I mean, we have the 17 sustainability development goals of the UN and all the supporting elements that go into achieving the UN sustainability development goals. And it seems like I mean, the opportunities for your students just seem abundant, if I could say. So how do you seek out, or yeah, how do you find these opportunities, or how do your students find them?
yeah, I would say it's not a problem. It's the opposite that's true because the program's new and growing. I have more opportunities than I have students so far. I basically, I mean, if you're looking at the hospitality industry, there's a labor shortage in the U.S. and students have the opportunity to be quote unquote more choosy or to be more selective when
Yeah.
looking at for experiences, and this works for their benefit, of course. But at the same time, you have a need in our nonprofit work and in nonprofit sectors and in government sectors to create more resilient, regenerative food systems that will last longer. The key word here is endurance, so they can endure. And
Mm-hmm.
so all of those opportunities are coming across my desk all the time. And I almost am blowing my students' emails up with the stuff I'm sending them. So these things are happening all the time. And special events are booked. I have an Ikejime workshop coming up in a couple weeks with student volunteers. We do a conference at UMass where we're going to be teaching students who do college food service around the nation about healthy approaches and sustainable approaches to their student dining. And so I just sent an email out this morning for student volunteers to help me do that. So the opportunities are abundant. And like I said, if anything, I could use more students in the program to answer all these opportunities.
But sustainable food systems, I'm sure, aren't without their own challenges. What's the single biggest challenge to making a food system more sustainable?
Well, I think part of it is hearts and minds, which really translates to food literacy. So, people make decisions all the time that have ramifications and effects throughout the food system. You need people to know about it. David Orr's famous for writing that it's not education that we need, but it's education of a different kind. And what he was talking about when he wrote that was he was talking about how it's a lack of environmental issues in K through 12 education uh, throughout the US, but also in other places in the world. It's a lack of that education that's telling students it's not important. So no matter what, we're teaching students something. And so if we're not teaching them about sustainability and food system management and managing our ecosystem and being good stewards to our environment and our planet, then we're teaching them it's not important.
Hmm.
And that's not
Yep.
something that can go well. So we have to challenge that and begin to push for more education of this sort, not only in higher ed where I reside, but also in undergraduate work, so people have investment in these sorts of things. Now, the great thing is that we have a great movement. You know, Sadly, it's climate change that's spurring it, but the reality is people are starting to wake up and sober up to the reality that we all live on spaceship Earth, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
And so as people realize this, more people are becoming more aware, are becoming more conscious, making decisions that are more responsible. And what's great about chefs who reside in the food systems and sustainability space is that we have a great platform for helping create change for the better, to create more sustainable, renewable, regenerative food systems that can adapt to perturbances such as like COVID in the future, but still endure.
Is there any place in the world that's doing a better job than, say, we might be doing in the US?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that there's no such thing as perfect sustainability.
Hmm.
Even farming, which we love and adore our farmers, but even farming is taking apart from the natural environment, right? We're interrupting the cycle. And if we're doing things right, we're replacing the cycle through composting and good stewardship and things like that. Places around the planet that do a better job, generally speaking, it's hard to put an evaluation of that. I would say one class I teach is an eco tourism class, which takes students on a study abroad to Costa Rica.
Hmm.
And one thing that I love about Costa Rican people is everyone I've ever met has a very strong eco literacy. They know their animals, they know their trees, they know about their food, and they understand that it's a big part of not only their country's sovereignty and part of their but it's their they have a stewardship sort of mentality that
Hmm.
they own this land, they manage the land, and that they need to do things that are right for the environment. Now, that is, of course, very it just depends on where you go, and sometimes it's small places where you're seeing the best actions take place versus like
Hmm.
large places or country borders and things like that. So where you can see small grassroots movements, where you see um, food system leaders, whether we're talking chefs or policy leaders or nonprofits that are helping advocate for food justice and food access, you see people cropping up all over the world.
Yeah.
Paul Hawken wrote a book called Blessed Unrest years ago. And this book talks about the concept that if all the nonprofits in the world coordinated and worked together for their shared missions for a better humanity, that we would have the largest, strongest coalition of change agents the world's ever seen. And he's right. And what's interesting about it is that it's that we're all working in silos, and we really should be sort of stirring the pot and networking together and coordinating more. And that's going to deliver better results than working in our little areas.
Do you think we're moving toward that with the UN Sustainable Development Goals?
Yeah, the SDGs are amazing, and they have shown progress, especially when it comes to hunger.
Yeah.
And I love to talk to my students about this, and also challenge some. So if you're looking at it through a critical lens, remember there's still development in that title, and so
Yeah.
there's some criticism with the development aspects. We don't necessarily need more development, but we do need more sustainability.
Hmm.
But with that said, they are wonderful because they share a vision that the whole world can ascribe to, that puts us on the right path. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Towards a more sustainable food future and more justice and more, hopefully, a cleaner environment. I feel like my country is far behind on this in terms of public policy, but it is something that is still, despite some of the government decisions that aren't necessarily in line with the SDGs, there are still citizens and groups that are still delivering on some of these goals.
Yeah, yeah, that's in line with what others have said. So I wanted to talk a little bit about sustainability in the kitchen for a second. A fuel to
Yay!
cook food is also a part of sustainability, yet the embrace of renewable energy in the kitchen has been slow. How do you see this changing in the future?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts there, and some interesting concepts. We know about things like induction cooking. We know about technological advances, some of which, like sous vide cookery, have some benefits that help with energy conservation, of course. We also know about ways that we can design restaurants in green, what we call green restaurant design. And I even teach a unit on that in one of my classes. If students are in a position, fortunate enough to make decisions about building infrastructure, that can be very, can be more sustainable and lower an environmental footprint. In addition, menu design is huge because when
Hmm.
designing menus, sourcing products, and deciding what you're going to sort of communicate through your menu, these are all important elements too. But there is some cautionary tale with you know with technological fixes. We can't over rely on them. It is important that we continue to invest in proper science and in technological advancements, but we need to make sure that there are no progress traps. And a progress trap is where you thought you were going to do something that was really going to improve things and it caused things to get worse or something
Oh,
like that.
huh.
That's what it was. So yeah, it's the progress trap, that the idea that the invention of personal computers is going to lower printing, and what it did was create far more printing
Oh,
that
that's right.
ever existed. Yeah. So as an example of a progress trap, so you want progress that's right and that's balanced and that is effectively helping things. And so in the kitchen, we look for those kinds of solutions. There's a little bit of criticism with some of the sort of modernist stuff that's occurred in the kitchen where we go too technologically advanced. And you're doing things in like cryovac bags, when we're circulating, say, meat in a sous vide circulator. Uh,
Hmm.
and it's the idea that we're displacing our senses from the cooking process and relying more on technology than our own sense of smell, taste, and things like that. And so we got to make sure that when we do have better technology that's more sustainable, that it isn't removing skills and isn't
Sure.
causing skill loss or what we call de-skilling, which a lot of the capitalistic, mentality of the world today, this career-driven lifestyle that we're all living, is causing that like fivefold. A lot of people's great grandmothers cook better than they ever will, and that's because they, always were able to cook. And now you're working like 50 hours a week and you're ordering takeout and things like that because you're not home enough to build the skills that you need to cook with or for your family.
So, if you could prepare or design a three-course meal with sustainability as its theme, what would you, Chef Lewis, prepare?
Well, step one, I'm going to look at what's outside, what's growing. I'm going to talk to my growers. So my menu is always going to be determined by working with my community partners and my fishermen to see what is available. What are they growing? What are they catching that's in season? That's where I start with my menu design. So it's not the content of that menu, or the final product of that menu that matters as much as what's driving it. And you know, I'm a big believer that a chef is a food system leader through partnership, not by being a top-down leader. You're not going to see me call my farmers and say, "Do you have zucchini blossoms?" And they're like, "Well, it's February. Of
Yeah.
course we don't." And then I say, "Well, I want to fly them in from Israel right now for $100 a clamshell." That's like ridiculous, and that's not something that a partner in the food system would do. I would reach out to my farmers to find out what's coming out of the ground, what do they have, and what can they move, what can I help them move. Chefs have you know skills and abilities to use, cuts of animals that aren't used as much by through retail sales. Chefs can use, misfit vegetables or vegetables that are like grade B, and we can turn them into amazing things because that's what we do for a living. And so I'm going to reach out to my farmers to design that menu. It's going to be based on the seasons. It's going to
Hmm.
be based on what is tasty, of course, because it's in season, and that means it's healthier, it's tastier, it's fresher, and it's more reflective of where I am and the terroir of my region.
Yeah, so if you wouldn't mind, what's in season where you are?
Well, let's see. So we are in New England.
Yeah.
It is early March, and so there's nothing coming out of the ground right this second. But what we do have is a lot of stuff that's in storage, and of course, greenhouse foods. And so, storaged items are like root vegetables, like carrots, turnips, and potatoes that have been cellared from the winter. And so, what's great about, and this is sort of an interesting thought that a lot of people don't know, but like if you're a warm weather chef, like you are in Florida or the Caribbean or anywhere around the equator, you're going to have an easier time coming up with seasonal products all year round. And if you're a chef in a colder region like I am in New England, you have to pickle, you have to preserve, you have to ferment, you have to
Yeah.
extend your season, you have to cellar, you have to cure things. And so that is a great part of, and a wonderful part of being a chef, is learning these skills and these things that have made humans successful as we've circumnavigated the globe throughout our history, being able to apply them to our menus. And so, yes, right now I'd be looking at root vegetables. I'd be looking at where it's too early for spring things like asparagus and stuff, but I
Hmm.
still have squashes. I have all kinds of stuff in greenhouses. I still have broccoli leaves and brassicas available, and Napa cabbage coming from one of the hydroponic farms down the road. It's hydroponic, but they're greenhouse and they grow in dirt, so they're kind of a hybrid farm, but they're great, and my students go to see them. They're just wonderful. So that's just an example, but of course you have animals year round as well.
Right. So you just brought it up. Johnson and Wales prides itself on providing its students with hands-on and experience-based learning. Uh, if you could elaborate a little bit more, how do you incorporate the more complex ideas of food systems into this style of learning?
Oh my gosh, Wendy, I get out of school, I go around with my students, we get on the bus, we get on the boat, and we go travel our food system. So what makes this program so exciting is where we're located in Providence, Rhode Island. We're in New England, and New England is a colonized area with a lot of small property lines, and geography is important because as you get into, say, the Midwest America, you're going to see more cornfields and hog
Mhm.
farms and single farms that take up many, many acres. So there's less variety. And so because I'm positioned in New England, I am right on Narragansett Bay, which is on the Atlantic Ocean. I have organic livestock farms, dairy farms, hydroponic farms. I have all kinds. I have dairy farm. Did I say dairy farms? Dairy, livestock, hydroponic. I have nonprofits that I take my students to all the time, and learning center farms. And of course, with the bay, we take boats right out here at Narragansett Bay, where we go cohogging, which is digging for clams. We call it in
Mhm.
Rhode Island. It's called cohogging. We go to American Mussel Harvesters, which is a mussel farm here right across the bay. And then we go to oyster farmers. I go to Bluff Hill Cove. My buddy Harvey is the oyster farmer there, and we shuck oysters right at his farm.
Oh,
And
wow.
we're doing all this under the sun. I mean, basically, what I'm teaching my students is how to navigate their food web, how to build relationships. So even though they're in my class in New England, when they go home to
Mhm.
Arizona, California, Idaho, wherever they're from, they're
Mhm.
going to be able to know how to navigate their food system, figure out who the nonprofits are that are helping with food access, who are the farmers that are providing food, who's growing what are the staple ingredients of the region. So they're going to learn the skills needed to navigate and put together that constellation of food people in their communities. And so we get to do that. We cook like at the farms. One farm we go to, Hillendale Farm, I'll have my students rotate through, and we'll work a field. We'll clean a chicken coop. We'll repair a greenhouse, or we'll pick tomatoes, and then we have a pizza oven on site. We bake pizzas. We come in with dough. ready
Hmm.
to go. And then we make our sauces. We pick things out of the greenhouse and out of the farm. We wash them off. We make toppings, and then we put them in the oven and we eat pizza together as the sun sets. It's pretty amazing.
Nice.
This is like, we do this in that in just one of my classes. I take them on 6 trips to do this kind of thing. We go to Wild Harmony Farm. It's a organic livestock farm where we help clear hog habitat. The hogs live in the woods. They're Berkshire hogs.
Hmm.
We also help with chickens and egg mobile washing and stuff like that. But then we even helped build a sugar shack once while we were making lunch in the sugar shack. By the time lunch was ready, the sugar shack walls were up, and we were done for the day. So
Wow.
um, uh, it was, it's just incredible, the opportunities that are around us, and we're already experiential by nature, cooking in the kitchens at Johnson Wales. But now we take that on the road. We cook on the boats. We cook at the farm, and we share food and break bread with our community food system leaders.
How far afield are you going? Are you traveling, beyond the borders of Rhode Island to Connecticut and Massachusetts and
Yeah,
farther?
yeah, but Connecticut and Massachusetts are only like 15 minutes away, depending on
No.
what direction you're going.
True.
But yes, we go to those 2 states, and of course Rhode Island. And the furthest I really take them is probably about 48 minutes. We've gone an hour before, but I don't need to go further. I mean,
Wow.
the farms are that close. Everything's so close. The boats are literally a 5-minute walk. The boat dock for we work with Save the Bay Rhode Island, a nonprofit that keeps our bays clean and healthy. And they lease land off our school property. So they're right there. We walk across the sports field and we're at the docks. And what's amazing is when students take my class, they'll be like, oh my God, this was here this whole time. I'm a junior. And I'm like, yeah, you never got outside of the dorm or something. This is like on campus. I mean, and we get on the boats and we go. It's amazing. I love uh, teaching that class, but I love this program. In my other classes, like I have a lab called plant-based cuisine, and that lab culminates in a chef's table that my students produce. And they source from farmers that they've been to in my other class. And
Oh,
so they've met these farmers, and now they're ordering from them, and they're inviting them to like a high end dinner at their chef's table to connect. So these people are, again, breaking bread, but they're
wow.
also eating with their chef from work, like their students, right? So they have jobs in the city, and they have a head chef, and they'll bring that head chef in. Then they'll bring like Anne Marie from Blackbird Farm in, and then they'll bring in maybe a media personality or their favorite chef from school, and the four of them have a dinner together. We even had Jacques Pepin come to one of our chef tables,
Wow.
and had a marvelous time. So these things are happening, and they're happening grassroots. These menus are written by students inspired by the growers of our area, and this is like what's it's the magic, lightning in a bottle, you could call it. But it's not that hard to achieve. You just got to go outside and you'll find it.
Yeah, and so I want to touch on something you mentioned a way earlier here, and about the chef and the influence of the chef. We've had several chefs on this podcast who have embraced sustainability and zero waste through their restaurants, and I want to know what role do those chefs or do chefs play in sustainable food systems?
Well, first I want to sort of remove a myth. And the one myth is that chefs can only be good stewards in their kitchen. And I would dispel that by saying the incidental power of the chef being positioned at an intersection. And that intersection is not just product sourcing, it's not just kitchen management, stewardship, composting, things like that, and making really smart menus, but it's also they have a platform to advocate for change. They're a small business in a community. They employ people in the community and have a restaurant family.
Mhm.
They make decisions that impact the environment. Like the chef feeds people, so they have food access power, and so it's about inviting others to the table. Uh, Being in the position of a chef in a restaurant gives you this opportunity to make great positive change, not just through your actions in the kitchen, but through your actions with people in your community, through your actions that impact the environment for the better, and the actions you take that build not just, we call it the economic branch of sustainability, but economic doesn't just mean making money, but it means paying people well in your business. It means taking care of your farmers so that they're getting a fair shake. And it also means enriching your community not just through financial needs, but enriching it through better like a better food system that's healthier and that can endure a long time.
Huh. Yeah. Uh, so let's draw back into considering our globe for a second. Who or what do you think has the biggest influence on our global food system?
Well, it's got to be people.
Mm,
That's clearly number one. Um, when you had mentioned earlier about issues in the food system, you know, students have to learn about these issues, and they do that in our program. Because you have to learn about them and put on a critical lens to understand what the problems are in order to create potential viable solutions. And so part of those solutions are, I mean, when you look at around the issue, it's like around the various issues, we consume too much meat in America. Um, we need to eat more plants.
hmm
We need to be less fossil fuel dependent. We need to be very careful of population growth because this is really the root of all the problems, from climate change all the way down to conflict and everything else we're dealing with, and food access issues and things like that. So all these things are interconnected, and they're what we call, this is, believe it or not, a real word, a wicked problem. And so in food sustainability dogma, or in sustainability dogma, wicked problems are hard to fix. And it's not just a New England term. If you're from New England, you know the word wicked is like
Yeah.
slang, but it's actually a scientific term, a scholarly scientific term that refers to things that are challenging. Like, for instance, homelessness. You can't just fix homelessness by giving people a house. There's
hmm
more to it than that. There's a lot more. And so issues in the food system like childhood obesity has a lot of different strings and nodes that are connected to it. And the food system is an entangled place. And so if you pull one string, you're going to have reverberations on others. So you have to have a multifaceted, dynamic approach to solving these issues. And that requires, teamwork. It requires collaboration. It requires not top-down leadership, but partnership leadership. And this is all sort of reflective of what we're trying to teach in this program and what our graduates should be able to do when they are out in industry and in the food system, being agents of change.
Huh. All right. So I wanted to talk a little bit about here we are in the month of March, which is National Nutrition Month where you are in the US. How do you think culinary skills or a lack thereof have influenced standards of nutrition? People
Well,
eat out much more than they did 40 or even 20 years ago. Do you think culinary skills should be taught earlier than, for instance, where what you're doing now in higher education?
yeah, obviously anything that brings people to food, I support because I'm a foodie and I
Yeah.
love this. And I think that people should be cooking more and more. It- this is what we used to do. I mentioned this earlier. I just touched on it, but really it's another wicked problem. And it's our capitalistic societies, this
Hmm.
idea that we should be working ourselves to death and not balancing family time, not having time to break bread together, to make a meal together, to teach your kids how to eat different foods and to enjoy them together and to learn how to do things. The great de-skilling is people forget how to make bread. People forget how to can and jar and pickle and preserve and grow a garden and then process the food and preserve it for the year. Those forgotten skills are great for chefs when it comes to employment, but they are not great for people because these are things that are not only skills that you need for survival, but they're
Hmm.
also ways to connect with each other, to spend time with your children, to slow down, and to eat foods that you are controlling the salt, sugar, fat that are inside of them.
Sure.
Um,
Hmm.
this is all like part of what you can do to change that. Relying on convenience foods, these foods are there because you're working to pay for those foods. It's one of those dilemmas that you're stuck in this. This catch 22, and so by relying on these convenience foods too much, and by choosing convenience foods that are not very good for you, because a lot of them aren't, then you're putting yourself in a position to be unhealthy, not only physically but spiritually, robbing yourself of opportunities to connect with family and stuff over. cooking and the food making process. It's therapeutic, and it lowers stress levels and things like that. This losing the skill of being able to cook means that you can't teach your kids to cook, which means you have to get
Mm.
formal education on this. You have to reach out, and that a lot of people feel like they're in that position. As I mentioned, like for most people, their great grandmother cooked better than they do.
Yeah.
And this is something that is sad, but something that we can still reverse.
Yeah, I mentioned this before we started this podcast. I have about 1,000 more questions that I could ask you, but for the purposes of brevity, just one more. So you no doubt come into contact with a vast spectrum of people in the food space. Who would you recommend for a future episode of this podcast?
Oh, there's so many. Oh my gosh. We're rich with you know food system players, quote unquote. Um, I would pick any of my growers. I have so many colleagues that can speak in the culinary space. We have a team of faculty that teach in this program that are very passionate about it, and they represent all sorts of experiences and perspectives that are compatible with this area of interest. But with that said, almost always like to go back to my growers because they're in touch with nature. They're in touch with the soil, and it really begins with the soil, right? So I'd say Rich Peterson, who works at Southside Community Land Trust, would be a great guy to interview because he's a soft-spoken guy, and he'll be like, he'll talk to you about, like, I love the word organic, man. This was our word, but they took it from us with some certification, and that's just not right. And when you talk to this guy, you're just like, wow, you just feel like so relaxed. And this guy's so in tune with nature and rhythm and has such a great philosophy that he just lowers your stress, when you see him. And of course, you have to see him at his farm, which is City Farm, owned by Southside Community Land Trust, a nonprofit in Providence that manages most of the urban gardens throughout the city and provides access to neighborhoods and people, community members who need a place to grow. So they reclaim land for growing, and so he's one of their farmers and a very inspiring individual.
Oh, excellent. I'm going to look up Southside Community Land Trust and City Farm after
Yeah,
we're done
remind me.
here.
I'll give you his phone number. But he's old school though. He doesn't have a cell, so you'll have to leave a message on the old tape recorder there,
Oh, I
and
like
then
that.
he'll call you back. Yeah, but he's amazing like that.
Okay. Well, hey, Brandon, thank you so much for taking the time to join me for coffee this afternoon.
My cup's empty, so I'll have to come back and refill it.
Well, I appreciate it. And thank you very much. This has been really interesting.
Thank you.
If you liked this episode, don't miss an episode by becoming a member. We're waiting for you each week with more guests. We're on all podcast platforms. Just search for Coffee with Scoolinary. We're also waiting for you at our website and on our social networks, where you can get to know all our courses and teachers.